Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. The topic this week is very serious and very sobering.
703,000 people die by suicide every single year globally. And that's not to forget also that for every suicide that does take place, there are many, many more people that actually attempt suicide as well.
Suicide is a major issue in the UK and the world over. My guest is Alice Hendy of Ripple Suicide Prevention, who has a very personal connection to the topic and has started a charity which is taking very practical steps to reduce the number of people taking their own life. Please do stay tuned. My guest is Alice Hendy, and she has set up the charity Ripple Suicide Prevention. And my first question to her was, how big a problem is suicide?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a massive issue, and it's an issue that is prevalent in all countries globally. So, according to the World Health Organization, roughly 703,000 people die by suicide every single year globally. And that's not to forget also that for every suicide that does take place, there are many, many more people that actually attempt suicide as well. So it's a huge problem and one that doesn't discriminate.
Just say that statistic again, because I what was it?
703,000 people.
Okay, my goodness.
Die by suicide.
I had absolutely no idea it could be quite. That is just absolutely staggering.
It is, yeah, it is, and I think it just goes to show how many people are finding things difficult around the world. You know, this isn't something that happens just in one country. This happens everywhere for a huge variety of reasons, and it's a very complex situation. But the bottom line is the statistics are pretty horrendous.
Yeah. Yeah, a huge problem worldwide. Is there any data about different sorts of places? You know, so is it a problem of the developed world, or you know, does anyone know?
Yeah, I mean, money and finances can absolutely come into play when somebody is experiencing suicidal thoughts. The general statistics are actually that there is a part to play with low and middle income countries and the link between suicide. So roughly 77% of global suicides occur in low and middle income countries. So that just goes to show that there is absolutely a correlation there. That's not to say, though, that we don't experience suicides in high income countries with GDP that's great and significant, because that does still have an impact as well. And as I mentioned, you know, suicide doesn't discriminate. It can happen to any of us, irrelevant of incomes and so on.
Okay, so you mentioned that huge statistic globally. Have we got any statistics specifically for the UK?
I haven't for the UK. I do have a statistic, though, around professions, because professions also come into play with regards to some that are more prevalent than others of experiencing suicide. In the UK, the most prevalent occupation where suicide impacts is actually the construction industry. So 2 men every single day take their lives in the construction industry in the UK.
Okay,
which is too many every single day.
Yeah. All right. So in a past life, I'm actually a chartered civil engineer. So I've spent many years working in the construction industry, and it is well, I suppose all industries have their kind of ways and means and foibles, but certainly the construction industry is quite different in that a lot of people work away from home.
Yeah.
and it's quite difficult to keep family life going when you're working away from home. And it's not just for a short spell of a few months. It can be years and years that people work away from home. I wonder if that's a factor.
But potentially, I mean, if you're working away from home, there's an element of isolation, loneliness that might come into play. Typically, also in the construction industry, you've got staff that are paid on a weekly basis, as opposed to monthly. And often financial situations and financial well-being comes into play with some of these individuals that do end up taking their lives from the construction industry. There is also evidence to suggest that drugs and alcohol substance misuse is also quite prevalent in the construction industry as well, which also plays a part. So there's a number of factors there, amongst others. But the fact of the matter is that, sadly, 2 men a day, every single day, will die by suicide in the construction industry. So much, much more needs to be done in order to stop that and actually safeguard these individuals from how they're feeling.
And that's in the UK in just one industry.
Just in the UK in one industry, yeah.
Okay. Let's try and maybe look at some of the other issues. We got professions. You mentioned income.
Yeah.
Is there any work been done or any statistics available on ethnicity? The people of different backgrounds, are they more or less likely to take their own lives?
Yeah, suicide is very complex, and people with particular identities or backgrounds can be at a higher risk. And suicide rates do vary between different ethnic groups, but the highest rates are actually with the white and mixed ethnicity groups. So for white individuals, it's at 14.9 deaths by suicide per 100,000. And for mixed ethnicity groups, it stands at 14.7 deaths per 100,000. Those statistics are from the Samaritans. So there is absolutely, different proportions of people that are more likely to take their life based on ethnicity. But again, this can happen to everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what we're getting at here is that it's scarily common. And it can affect almost anybody for a vast range of reasons.
It absolutely can. Particularly in the UK, we've got a massive problem with male suicides. On average, 75%, so 3/4 of the suicides that happen in this country are men. There's a number of reasons for that. Again, there is still the persona of being the breadwinner, earning the money, providing for your family. There's still a huge stigma surrounding the topic of mental health and suicide. And men are statistically much less likely to open up and talk about how they're feeling. And as a result, unfortunately, that often does result in people taking their own lives. So we've got a lot to do with men here in order to improve the situation, because 3/4 of them, being male is quite staggering, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big statistic. All right. I mean, you've mentioned generally on a few potential reasons why people might take their own lives. Are there any others that it's worth touching on, do you think?
Yeah, there's a number, and this links actually to what we're doing at Ripple Suicide Prevention and the work that we're doing to try to assist people at an earlier point of intervention. So I've briefly touched on substance misuse today.
Yep.
Alcohol is an issue. Being intoxicated is thought to increase suicide by up to 90 times compared to somebody who's completely sober. From a drug perspective, people who have an addiction are up to 14 times more likely to die by suicide than others. Financial well-being is huge as well, and this is one that I can touch more on from a personal perspective here as well. 58% of people who have over £30,000 worth of debt have considered suicide and taking their own life. Financial well-being and the state of people's finances have a huge part to play in how people are feeling, particularly if you are male. Goes back to what I was saying earlier about being the breadwinner and being able to provide for your family. Other factors might actually be to do with relationships. So if you split up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or you're in the process of separating from your spouse, you're going through a divorce, all of that, those things regarding relationships can have a huge impact on somebody as well, and how they're feeling.
And certainly these are all potentially very stressful events in your life.
Absolutely. They're huge milestones in somebody's life, and they're very stressful. And in the cases that are extreme, and that might go to court, or if you've got children involved in the situation, or if you've got houses to sell within the divorce settlement and so on, that's a massive life change. And unfortunately, some people simply don't feel like they're able to cope with that, and feel like they're better off not being around, which isn't the case.
No. So just then you mentioned that you have some personal experience, and also you started this charity Ripple. So what's your connection to the topic? What's the driving force behind starting the charity?
I'd rather not have started this charity because unfortunately I was touched by suicide in November of 2020. So it was Wednesday, the 25th of November 2020. We're in the midst of COVID at that point, and I had a knock at the door at 5:28 in the morning with two police officers stood in front of me. And they came into the house and they sat me down and told me that about 2 hours prior, they had found somebody that had taken their own life, and that person has been identified as my brother, Josh.
Okay, so you've got a very good reason for starting this charity. And a terrible event obviously affected you majorly. However, I guess this is your way of something positive coming out of it.
Yeah, it's certainly helped me, Mike, with regards to giving me a purpose myself. Losing Josh is without doubt the worst thing that could ever have happened to me in my life. So anything else that happens to me going forward is never going to compare. My brother was 21 when he took his life.
And so he was a young man with it all ahead of him.
Young man, whole life ahead of him, very talented, lots of friends, family that loved him, job, everything going well on the surface. And he decided he didn't want to be around anymore. And it's something actually that I now struggle with on a daily basis, as do my parents, in trying to work out what life looks like without Josh, and trying to navigate through day-to-day life and existence, really, after suffering a loss like that, with that magnitude.
Okay, right. Well, I can only sympathise. I'm fortunate I haven't been in that situation, so I'm sorry about that. However, tell us something about the charity Ripple, and how you want to change things going forward.
So when I lost Josh, I went through his mobile devices, his tablet, his laptop, his phone, and I found that probably for about 2 or 3 months prior to him ending his life, he was looking at harmful material on the internet, and he was researching how he could actually go about ending his life. Now, believe it or not, there is actually instructions, step-by-step guidance, encouragement out there for people to end their life, available on the internet, unbelievably. So because nothing existed to intervene when my brother was conducting those searches, or to interrupt him at that pivotal moment, I created my own piece of technology that I've called Ripple that does exactly that. So in terms of what Ripple actually is, it's a piece of software. It can be downloaded in 2 different ways. The first way is as a browser extension. It can be placed on your browser of choice. So that could be Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Safari, Opera, whatever browser it is you use. And once downloaded, it means that if a harmful search is conducted relating to the topic of self-harm or suicide, then the Ripple technology would intervene, interrupt, and instead signpost that person to a selection of mental health resources that they can access 24/7 for free. We can also now put Ripple on Wi-Fi networks, and lots of organisations have done so. Football clubs have put it on their stadiums. Network Rail have put it on a lot of their train stations. And it means that if anybody does conduct a search that's harmful whilst connected to that Wi-Fi network, again, Ripple would intervene and signpost them to support.
Okay. I suppose my first thought is this sort of behaviour widespread? You know, was your brother a one-off, or is this actually quite common?
There are 1.2 million internet searches for how to end your own life around the world every single month.
Okay, I think you've answered the question. Goodness,
Yeah.
that is utterly staggering to me,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter what I think. That's a fact.
Yeah, that's a fact. And, you know, if you think about it, if we want to find the answer to something, where do we now all go? We go to the internet.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is also proven in this case. So I've made it my mission, really, as Josh's sister, to get to these people who are struggling, finding things difficult and searching for harmful material, and to let them know that there is hope and there is a different, more hopeful path that they can choose.
Right. So if someone is having these kind of thoughts and they start doing these searches, if they're using a Wi-Fi which is public, there's a chance that they'll be found and sent some messages. What about if parents might be concerned about children? Can you get this software onto their computer?
So Ripple is free for schools, colleges, universities, and parents to download to safeguard children and young people. Now, for those who are under the age of 18 at schools and colleges, we can alert HR, wellbeing teams, pastoral care teams to any harmful searches that have been conducted. For home use and for use in businesses or elsewhere in the public, unfortunately, we're simply not allowed to do that due to data privacy restrictions. So instead, what we can do is interrupt that person at their most vulnerable point, at that crisis moment, and instead signpost them to a more hopeful, positive path.
Okay. And how does that work? How does that physically work? Is there sort of a pop-up on the screen?
Yeah, exactly that. It's a pop-up. There's a short breathing exercise at the beginning, which has been statistically proven to help that person pause, stop, reflect, think about what they're doing. And then once that breathing exercise has concluded, the Ripple tool comes up exactly as you mentioned, Mike, just like a pop-up. It's been built with evidence in mind. So we've thought very carefully and done lots of research on things such as the colours that we're using, the illustrations that we use, the options that we signpost to, the wording, everything, in order to make that person feel like they are safe. They're not being checked up on. It's not Big Brother's watching you. We are simply intervening at that person's most vulnerable point to let them know that there's a better way than this.
Okay. No, I'm not a great techie. Is this thing likely to be on your? Can you get it on your phone as well as your laptop or your desktop computer?
So you can get it on your phone if you are connected to a Wi-Fi network that has Ripple downloaded on it. Right. So as an example, my football club and my brother's football club, West Ham United, have deployed Ripple at the London Stadium. So that means if I'm at the London Stadium and I'm on my phone and I'm connected to that Wi-Fi network and I conduct a harmful search, I will be intervened and interrupted through my mobile device. Same at the train stations that we've got it, same as Manchester Airport, who have got it. Revolution Bars, the bar chain all up and down the country, have also got it for their customers as well. So in that sense, it's available on mobile devices, but as a standalone product, it's not. purely because there's technical restrictions that don't allow us to do so.
And can you tell from all these places where it's kind of loaded up how many times the software has picked up something that and it thinks, right, I need to do something about this, send a pop-up, send some information. Have you got data on that?
Yes, we have. Yeah. So since we launched Ripple on World Suicide Prevention Day, which is the 10th of September, 2021, we have now had over 2 million downloads of the Ripple tool around the world, and it's intercepted and interrupted over 48,000 harmful online searches to do with the topic of self-harm or suicide. So that's 48,000 harmful searches where we've managed to get to these people and actually let them know that there's a more hopeful path for them.
Again, these figures are just staggering. I mean, it's just terrifying, really. Okay, let me ask another question, which I don't know if this is appropriate. The kind of things that, you don't have to give me the specific words or phrases, but the sorts of phrases that people use to search. Have you got a team of people, or how do you kind of assess what they should be? And do those sort of change over time? Because language, especially language on the internet, kind of evolves, doesn't it?
Yeah, great question. We have a team in place that is constantly monitoring and looking for harmful searches that people are conducting. We attend a number of steering groups and a number of meetings on a monthly basis with huge numbers of other suicide prevention charities and data organisations that help us to collate these terms and put them into the back end of the Ripple tool if necessary. Now, as I'm sure you can appreciate, the searches are pretty grim reading, to be honest.
Yeah.
We've got about 4,000 words, phrases, questions, statements to do with the topic of self-harm or suicide that trigger the Ripple tool into action. But just to give you an example of how we try to stay up with the latest trends and the latest language that's used. If somebody was to go on the internet and search for, I run out of shampoo and conditioner at the same time, that person is actually telling you that they're suicidal.
Okay, all right.
If somebody searches and types in, I had pasta for dinner last night, that person is actually telling you that they're suicidal. So we keep up to date with those latest trends where people are trying to get around algorithms in order not to be picked up. And we try and mitigate that by adding it into the Ripple tool and ensuring that we're there to intervene if necessary.
All right. That needs to be looked at. I mean, because these kind of things change frequently,
all the time.
I would imagine. So you've got to keep on top of that.
Yeah, all the time. And it's a constant maintenance battle that we face. Also, the methods that people choose and that people use also change. And that can be as a result of a number of factors. It could be to do with costing of resources. It could also be to do with deaths that are by suicide that might actually have been reported in the press. So the press and the media have got a huge responsibility here as well to make sure that they're not giving in-depth information about suicide or locations or methodology to ensure that people don't copy that.
Do the press take that seriously?
It varies. I still on a very regular basis see articles that do not use the correct language regarding suicide and also report on methodology, which is a huge no-no. There's
have you got editors of newspapers on your speed dial?
I do.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I've only spoken to you a few minutes, but that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. All
right. Yeah, I do. Some are better than others. There is guidelines out there by the Samaritans, which are very clear and very easy to interpret. But sadly, some media outlets still don't seem to be using it. It's getting better, but it's still an issue.
What about, I mean, the media outlets to one side, they're important. what about the people that are running these kind of websites in the first place? I mean, what kind of people would do that? And
Yeah,
I'm sure you thought about stopping them, but
yeah.
is that feasible?
I think the answer, Mike, really is a troubled individual would be putting out this material on the internet, providing instructions and so on to individuals who want to take their life. A typical example of this, which has been reported in the media very widely, is the case of Kenneth Law, who was a chef over in Canada. And he has been proven to sell poisonous substances to a range of different people over the internet. And that's unfortunately resulted in people no longer being here with us. He has been convicted. The National Crime Agency have worked with the Canadian authorities to convict him. But that's just one example. In terms of actually getting this information and these websites and forums and so on shut down, the introduction of the online harms bill will certainly help with that.
Okay, I don't know what that is specifically.
It's a policy that the government have signed off and approved. It's due to come into play properly, where they can actually impose sanctions on these organisations as of the middle of 2025. And it means going forward that if any organisations or individuals are seen to publicise suicide, promote suicide or self-harm in any way, shape or form, they will be held accountable for their actions and prosecuted as a result. Now, that's great because we don't want any of this material to be available in the first place, but we have to wait for that to happen until the middle of 2025. And frankly, this is something that needs to be happening now. Yeah.
Okay. And that's a factor of laws take a while to come into force.
Correct.
And get through the books and all the rest of it.
Correct. But how many more people are we going to lose to suicide from now until then as a result of this content that's available on the internet? Thousands and thousands and thousands. So this is a real issue. Yes, it's great news that it's coming into play, but as a grieving sister and somebody who's lost their brother to suicide in this way, this is urgent and should be implemented immediately.
Yeah, on the face of it, it seems like it should be in tomorrow, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right, back to Ripple and your software. It's in use worldwide.
It is. It's available in 49 countries around the world in 14 different languages at the moment.
I was going to ask about the languages because when you were talking about the languages have to be the language that people use for searches has to be changed and updated. You've got to do that 14 times.
Absolutely, at the moment, and we're due to expand that going forward as well to reach a higher number of people. But ultimately, what that means is, if I have Ripple at my organisation and I'm based in Paris, in France, and I conduct a search that's harmful in French to do with how to end my life, the Ripple tool would be presented to me in French, and it would signpost me to the suicide and self-harm related support services in France within my vicinity.
Right. You must have a lot of people on board that are helping you with this.
Sadly not. Sadly not. I've got 4 full-time staff that work on Ripple and 3 volunteers, me included as one of those volunteers. I've got a full-time day job alongside Ripple as well, working as a global cybersecurity manager. So it's incredibly busy, but Ripple gives me a purpose and gives me a reason to open my eyes each day.
Yeah, so this has become very clear that this is something very important to you over the last few minutes, and it's extraordinary what you're doing. It's opened my eyes to something which I essentially I didn't really know anything about. I've got a couple more questions. If people are listening to this, and 2 things. First of all, thank goodness, this is really useful. This is helping a lot of people. I would like to donate some money to the cause. I'm sure you'd like to hear from them. How can they contact you?
Yeah, look, it all helps. We're a very small family-run charity, so anything would be absolutely amazing. But I think the thing for us as well is raising awareness of what we provide, letting schools know, colleges know, universities know that this is a free resource for them. Getting this in businesses and organisations, this is something we can put in place to safeguard staff. Any of the above, please contact us. Our website is ripplesuicideprevention.com and our email address is info@ripplesuicideprevention.com. We're also on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We'd be delighted to hear from anybody in any capacity that they might be able to help us.
Right. And so that was going to be my next question, actually. If you are responsible for a football club, for a school, for a college, whatever, and you want some help, how to do that. But also specifically, if you're a parent or you know someone that you are worried about for whatever reason, this is slightly different from the Ripple question. But if you see someone and you're suddenly worried, what should you actually do?
Okay, best advice here that would be appropriate to mention to somebody who you believe is really finding things tough. There's a common myth out there that if you ask somebody if they are thinking about suicide, that it will put the idea in their head, which is completely incorrect. If you believe that somebody is actively expressing suicidal thoughts, the best advice I can give you is to please ask them directly. Often what that will involve is the individual who you're asking would feel a huge sense of relief and are much more likely to open up about how they're actually feeling. So ask them directly. Make sure you're also asking people how they're doing twice. It's very common, isn't it, in a standard conversation? How are you? Yeah, fine, thanks. How are you? Yeah, all good.
It's part of a greeting, isn't it? It's a greeting. It's nothing more than a greeting. Yeah.
Exactly that. But how would it feel if you asked them again? Sorry, Mike, how are you actually feeling? How are you really doing today? And you might actually get a different answer. And that is often the case. Be vigilant. Know that there are many signs to look out for in somebody. It's not just their mood and how they're presenting emotionally. It might be physical changes in their appearance. It might be timekeeping. It might be hygiene. It might be spending their money differently. There are so many reasons and factors that might be influencing somebody.
Essentially a change in behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. Of any kind. But also bear in mind that sometimes there isn't any. Sometimes there isn't any changes at all, and somebody still could feel suicidal. It's very, very, very complex. On our website, ripplesuicideprevention.com, we've got a whole host of information, including amazing resources that you can signpost people to, depending on what it is they're going through, whether that be eating disorders, financial issues, drugs, alcohol, or relationship problems or work-related problems. Anything, we've got the resources there to signpost them to. And if you get stuck, please email us.
Right. Okay. Alice, I think the last few minutes have been potentially very useful for scarily too many people. So thank you for taking the time to go through what you've been doing, hoping to help people. One last time, please just give the website.
Sure, it's www.ripplesuicideprevention.com.
Okay. Yeah, Alice, thank you so much indeed.
Pleasure.
I think that's going to be very useful for many people.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much to my guest this week, and that was Alice Hendy of Ripple Suicide Prevention. Thank you very much to you for listening, and have a healthy week. Until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.